It's March 2018. A police sergeant, confident and composed, heads to a crucial meeting to finalize her next move. This isn't just any officer. This is Sergeant Rosemary Ndlovu from the Tembisa police station. But this particular move, which was part of a long and scary game she was playing, was going to be a mistake in the dangerous puzzle she was putting together. She couldn't know it then, but the clock was ticking. On this very day, the greatest and most horrifying secret of Sergeant Ndlovu was about to be ripped wide open, leaving everyone who knew her name utterly stunned. This is the story of how a female South African police officer turned into a criminal. Born in Bushbuckridge, a town in Mpumalanga, in 1978, Rosemary Ndlovu's early life was like that of many others in the region. At some point, seeking better opportunities or a different path, she made her way to the bustling economic heart of South Africa, Johannesburg. It was here that she would embark on a career that placed her directly on the side of the law. Rosemary joined the South African Police Service, an institution tasked with serving and protecting the nation's citizens. Over the years, she became a police sergeant stationed at the Tembisa police station. This wasn't just a job, it was a position of responsibility. As a sergeant, she would have had duties that involved community interaction, perhaps leading junior officers, and being a visible presence of law enforcement. Colleagues would have known her, worked alongside her on shifts, and shared the daily grind of police work. To them, she was Sergeant Ndlovu, one of their own. However, this picture of a committed officer didn't tell the whole story. Hidden from most, there were growing cracks in Rosemary's life. She reportedly developed a serious gambling addiction, a problem that can quickly spiral into a desperate need for money. This need didn't just stay a private struggle, it started to cast long shadows. There were whispers, and later more concrete reports, of her being heavily in debt. She wasn't just trying to make ends meet, she was allegedly trying to dodge loan sharks, individuals not known for their patience or gentle methods of collection. This mounting financial pressure seems to have become a powerful, corrosive force in her life. Another part of her personal life was her relationship with Maurice Mabasa, the man she lived with. He wasn't just her boyfriend, he was the father of her child. He shared her home, and it seemed he was a very important part of her life. To people who didn't know them well, their relationship probably looked normal, like a couple making a life together. Maurice was one of the people closest to her, someone who should have been able to trust her completely. He was family, the person she shared the job of raising a child with. But, as sad events would later show, being close to Rosemary put him in great danger because of her terrible greed. Tragically, this terrible greed began to show its power from 2012 onwards, leading into a dark chapter in Rosemary Ndlovu's story that lasted until 2018. It was a time when those close to her began to one another the other, and with each Rosemary stood to gain financially. The trail of began in March 2012 with her cousin, Madala Witness Homu. It wasn't an illness or a random accident that claimed his life. Instead, reports indicate Homu was found a brutal way to Before his Rosemary had taken out insurance policies on him. After he was gone, she reportedly cashed in, receiving a sum said to be over 131,000 rands, approximately $17,200 USD at the time. For Rosemary, it seemed, the life of her cousin had a price tag, and she was there to collect it. This first, perhaps, was a test of her horrifying new path, a path that she would continue to walk with chilling determination. Just over a year later, in June 2013, struck even closer to home. This time, the victim was Rosemary's own sister, Audrey Ndlovu. The circumstances surrounding Audrey's were particularly insidious. It's understood that Audrey had been staying at Rosemary's house. She fell ill, was allegedly poisoned, and then, to ensure the dreadful deed was done, strangled. The image of one sister taking another's life in such a cold and intimate manner is deeply disturbing. For this unspeakable act, Rosemary allegedly collected a significantly larger insurance payout, reported to be in the region of 717,421 rands, approximately $72,500 USD at the time. The pattern was becoming clearer. A relative would and Rosemary would benefit. In that same month, June 2013, something else terrible happened. It felt like bad things just kept happening to Rosemary's family, like a dark cloud was hanging over them. Her niece, Zanele Motha, was also killed in a violent way. Just like her cousin, Witness Homu, it was said that Zanele was to and, like with the other, insurance policies had been set up. After Zanella, Rosemary received more money, about 119,840 rands, around $12,000 USD at the time. These were happening more often and were very cruel. The year 2015 brought what was perhaps one of the most shocking in her spree, one that truly highlighted the depths of her betrayal. In October of that year, her live-in partner, Maurice Mabasa, the father of her child, was found. His was not swift or subtle. He had been over 76 times, a frenzy of violence, and his body was then dumped. This was the man she shared her home with, the co-parent to her child. For Rosemary to orchestrate the of someone so intimately connected to her life was a profound display of her ruthlessness. Again, there were insurance policies, and it's said she got over 131,000 rands, around $9,700 USD at the time. The man who should have been very safe with her became another person she for money. A period of relative quiet followed, or perhaps other schemes were simply not as visible. But the resumed. In April 2017, another of Rosemary's nephews, Mayani Mashaba, lost his life. It was reported that he had met with Rosemary the day before he was. The specifics of his added to the chilling narrative. As with the others, the motive appeared to be the insurance money that Rosemary stood to gain from his passing. The last in this terrible series of events happened in January 2018. Her nephew, Brilliant Mashego, became the last victim for whose Rosemary would be convicted in this spree. He was reportedly last seen with Rosemary, a recurring theme where her presence often preceded tragedy for her relatives. During her trial, Rosemary herself admitted to taking out funeral policies for him, though she denied orchestrating his. For years, this string of tragedies had befallen Rosemary Ndlovu's family, and with each she collected insurance money. To an outsider, it might have just seemed like an unbelievable run of bad luck. But for those trained to look for patterns, especially within the police force itself, a different, more disturbing picture began to emerge. The sheer number of deceased relatives, all linked to Rosemary through insurance policies, started to feel less like a coincidence and more like a sinister design. The first seeds of suspicion weren't necessarily a dramatic, sudden revelation, but rather a growing unease. Perhaps it was a specific claim that seemed too timely, or a colleague within the South African Police Service, SAPS, who, knowing Rosemary and the inherent risks and realities of life and found the frequency of fatalities around her statistically improbable and unsettling. It's often said that police officers have a keen sense for when something is off, and it's likely that someone, somewhere within her own professional circle, began to connect the dots that Rosemary herself had so carefully laid out, thinking they led only to profit. The investigation didn't explode into action overnight. It started subtly, with quiet inquiries, and a closer look at the circumstances surrounding the and the subsequent insurance claims. As investigators began to delve deeper, the pattern became undeniable. Each seemed to pave the way for a financial windfall for Rosemary. The very system she was a part of, with its access to information and investigative tools, slowly began to turn its focus inward towards one of its own. What truly accelerated the investigation and brought Rosemary's deadly schemes to a halt was her own escalating desperation and greed. She wasn't satisfied with the money she had already gained from the of 6 relatives. By early 2018, she was actively plotting another horrific crime, one that was even more audacious and cruel. Her target this time was her surviving sister, Joyce, and Joyce's 5 young children. The plan was monstrous, to have them all burned alive in their home. This plot was the ticking clock that ultimately led to her undoing. Rosemary needed more money, and she was prepared to annihilate an entire family unit to get it. It was this desperate and horrifying plan that led her to make a fatal mistake. In her search for someone to carry out these Rosemary approached a man she believed was a hitman. Looking at the last 6 a frightening pattern of how she operated became clear. Rosemary Ndlovu didn't always person herself. She often used hitmen, paying other people to do the terrible job. This way, she kept herself away from the actual but she was still involved in planning it and getting the money. Following the same method, when she decided to sister Joyce and Joyce's family, she again went in search of a hitman. Unbeknownst to her, the hitman she contacted, or confided in, was not willing to go through with such a heinous act, especially one involving the murder of children. This person became an informant, a crucial link that would lead investigators directly to Rosemary. The police, now armed with chilling information about an imminent threat to Joyce and her children, acted decisively. They orchestrated a sting operation in March 2018. This wasn't just a routine arrest. It was a carefully planned maneuver designed to catch a police officer, one of their own colleagues, red-handed. An undercover police officer was brought into pose as the hitman Rosemary was looking to hire. The meeting was arranged. Rosemary, believing she was finalizing the details for the murder of her sister and her 5 children, spoke openly with the undercover officer. She allegedly provided instructions, discussed methods, and confirmed her intentions. Critically, these conversations were being recorded. Every word she uttered, every detail she laid out for the supposed hitman, became irrefutable evidence against her. She explained how she wanted her sister and the children to be killed, even allegedly suggesting they be burnt inside their house to make it look like an accident. She also reportedly pointed out her sister's home to the supposed hitman. With these damning recordings, the net closed tight around Sergeant Rosemary Ndlovu. The evidence was overwhelming. The very person who had worn a badge and pledged to uphold the law was caught on tape plotting the most horrific of crimes against her own flesh and blood. Her arrest sent shockwaves through the Tembisa police station, where she worked, and reverberated across the entire South African police service. How could a colleague, someone they shared duties and perhaps daily conversations with, be capable of such profound evil? The public was equally stunned and horrified. The story of a killer cop, a woman who murdered her family for insurance money, was almost too ghastly to believe. The investigation had successfully closed in, bringing an end to her reign of terror. When Rosemary Ndlovu finally stood trial, South Africa watched intently. The case was a chilling saga of betrayal and greed, and the courtroom became the stage for the final act in her shocking story. The former police sergeant, once entrusted with upholding the law, now faced a mountain of evidence detailing how she had systematically orchestrated the murders of her own family members. The prosecution, representing the state, painstakingly built its case. They didn't just present a theory, they laid out a trail of damning evidence. Central to their argument were the numerous insurance policies Rosemary had taken out on her relatives, often just before their untimely deaths. These documents painted a clear picture of her motive: cold, hard cash. Cell phone records also played a crucial role, often placing Rosemary in contact with her victims shortly before they were killed, or linking her to the hitmen she hired. Some of the most compelling testimony came from the very men Rosemary had tried to recruit to commit murder. These individuals, some of whom had backed out or turned informant, stood in court and recounted how the police sergeant had approached them, offering money to kill her family members. Their words painted a horrifying picture of her manipulative and ruthless nature, and then there was the undeniable evidence from the sting operation. The audio and video recordings of Rosemary coolly discussing the planned murder of her sister Joyce and Joyce's 5 children with an undercover police officer posing as a hitman. In these recordings, her own voice condemned her, leaving little room for doubt about her intentions. The prosecution wove all these threads together to portray Rosemary Ndlovu as a calculating serial killer driven by an insatiable greed for insurance payouts. Facing this onslaught of evidence, Rosemary Ndlovu's defense was inconsistent and often unconvincing. She pleaded not guilty to the charges, attempting to deny her involvement and discredit the witnesses who testified against her. She tried to portray herself as a loving family member who was simply unlucky, a victim of circumstance. However, her explanations often seemed flimsy when weighed against the solid evidence presented by the state. Perhaps one of the most heart-wrenching moments of the trial came when Rosemary's own mother, Maria Mushawana, testified. Rosemary had also been accused of plotting to have her mother killed. The image of an elderly woman speaking about her own daughter's alleged murderous intentions was profoundly tragic and underscored the depth of Rosemary's betrayal. Throughout the trial, Rosemary Ndlovu's demeanor in court became a story in itself. Far from appearing as a remorseful or frightened accused person, she often displayed a shocking lack of emotion, a nonchalant attitude that many found deeply unsettling. She would be seen smiling, pulling faces at journalists, or even appearing to fall asleep during proceedings. At times, she was openly defiant and disruptive, challenging witnesses or making theatrical gestures. This bizarre behavior, broadcast by the media, captivated and horrified the public, adding another layer of infamy to her case. It was as if she couldn't grasp the gravity of her situation, or perhaps it was a calculated act of defiance. After a lengthy trial, the moment of judgment arrived in 2021. The court found Rosemary Ndlovu guilty. She was convicted on 6 counts of for the deaths of her partner, Maurice Mabasa, her cousin, Madala Witness Homu, her sister Audrey, her niece Zanelli Motha, and her nephews Mayeni Mashaba and Brilliant Mashego. She was also found guilty of the attempted of her mother, Maria Mushawana, as well as multiple counts of fraud and incitement to commit. The sentencing that followed reflected the heinous nature of her crimes. Rosemary Ndlovu was handed 6 concurrent life sentences for the murders. In addition, she received many more years for the other charges, ensuring that she would likely spend the rest of her natural life behind bars. Justice, though slow, had finally caught up with the cop. The trial had not only brought justice for her victims, but had also exposed the dark heart of a woman who had once worn a badge of honor. Rosemary Ndlovu's conviction in 2021 and her hefty prison sentence brought a legal end to her reign of terror. But the story didn't simply stop there. The shockwaves from her crimes continued to ripple outwards, affecting many lives and leaving behind a disturbing legacy, along with several unsettling questions that may never be fully answered. Once behind bars, stripped of her police uniform and her freedom, Rosemary Ndlovu didn't just fade quietly into the prison population. Even in prison, reports have emerged suggesting that her manipulative and dangerous tendencies didn't entirely disappear. There were allegations that she was involved in further plots from within the prison walls, including conspiracies to harm individuals connected to her case, such as the investigating officer who played a key role in bringing her to justice, and even an ex-husband of a fellow inmate. These reports, if true, paint a picture of a woman whose criminal mindset remained active, even when physically constrained. Life in prison for Rosemary became another chapter, albeit one under lock and key rather than a complete cessation of her scheming. For the surviving family members of her victims, the aftermath of the trial was a complex period. While the guilty verdict and sentencing offered a measure of justice and perhaps some closure, it could never undo the profound loss and betrayal they had experienced. These families had lost loved ones, children, siblings, partners, not to accident or illness, but to the calculated greed of someone who was part of their own circle, someone who in many cases they should have been able to trust implicitly. The emotional scars run deep. Imagine the pain of knowing a relative, a police officer no less, planned and executed the murders of your family members for money. Rebuilding trust and navigating life after such a devastating series of events is an incredibly difficult journey for these survivors. The community, too, particularly in Tembisa, where she served as an officer, had to grapple with the reality that one of their protectors had been a predator. Besides what happened right away, people who followed the case still have many questions and doubts that worry them. Even though Rosemary was found guilty of 6 relatives, many people have strong feelings that she might have more people. Worrying questions came up about the deaths of at least 2 of her own children. They had also years before, and it was said she got insurance money for them too. She was not officially accused or found guilty of these deaths in the 2021 trial because there wasn't enough proof then. But this possibility makes her story even more terrible. Were there other family members or people she knew whose deaths weren't checked carefully at the time? Could they also have been because of her plans? We may never know exactly how many crimes she committed, which leaves a scary feeling of not knowing. The complete reason why she did these things is also still hard to understand. Even though wanting money was the clear reason, how cold-hearted she was, how she kept doing these things, how she was able to trick the people closest to her for such a long time, and the strange way she acted in court make it seem like she had very serious mental problems, more than just desperately needing money. Trying to fully understand what was going on in Rosemary Ndlovu's mind is still like a difficult puzzle. In the end, Rosemary Ndlovu's crimes left many worrying questions that show what terrible things people can do when they are overcome by greed. Her name is now permanently recorded in South Africa's crime history as one of the most famous and evil female killers. She was a police officer before, who in the end betrayed everyone in the worst way.